11-page stories.
Written through L.T. Zupan. Read by L.T. Zupan.
Story number 14. Before Violet Flowers. 1 Kind of like a test. Kurt sat, shallowing his thoughts with great ambition. He had just materialized into the coffee shop on the beach in his old hometown. Materialized from a vapor into the solid planes of time's sequence and Earth's cycles. Back to the home he had once known, the old world. His death had really been of inconsequence to him and had been rather scary and painful. Well, scary first, which overlapped into and ultimately became great pain, overwhelming in fact. After the terror pain came a transportation of a kind of a sort. He had tunneled into the great oval egg, matrix-esque, Goliath structure that it is. He had incorporated the information of all his former lives, or should it just be called life, singular really, and had then been vaporized. As a vapor, he coalesced back to our fair planet, and now at the coffee shop, Kurt sat. He was in a body now, again, and it was physical and solid, more or less. He sipped from his beverage, slowly, and thought, and smoked. What a palpable burnt flavor the smoke in the mocha encapsulated. What a pointless mirroring of dying. It was pathetically beautiful. Moreover, pathetic and worthless. A girl walked up to his vaguely geometric table. It was fucking dark green. She had hair somewhere pleasingly between red and purple. "Hi," she said, and smiled a little, hiding her minor nervousness poorly. "Hi there," he said back politely. "How are you doing?" She smiled a little again, visible mild curiosity. "I'm okay, I guess. It's a pretty day today." And he forced a frowning smile back at her. Although he tried his hardest to make it something sweet and nice sent her way, it was worse than depressing before it left his post-cynical face. "Do you come here a lot?" "I've never been here before, except maybe once or twice this one other time." "Yeah. I've been here quite a lot. Many times." "Okay," she quietly muttered back, and paused. "Well, I hope you have a great day," she sputtered out as she slowly began to float away to other regions of the coffee shop. He stood up and went to the road. His limbs moved in a quadruplex of complicated synchronicity, movements that had developed over millennia, all to carry his brain to its next non-desire. He felt the underside of his foot feel teeter-totters of pressure through his shoes from the warm, hard ground and its undeniable massive flatness. Arteries and veins in the tissues carried out their task now that their coffee break was over. Even his blood cells were post-tired. He flagged a taxi cab down and got in. 2 Kurt went to the ocean. It was all gray and bleary, but its profound distances and its grandeurs were far from obscured by clouds, though many clouds were there. "So many times I used to miss you, sweet Poseida. But you are here now, aren't you?" Kurt said to himself. He tranced out into the sea, as was usual to do when one is facing it. And it meant nothing to him. Well, at least his body didn't have to urinate, he thought, and probably never would, ever again. At least there was that. Sadness started to swell in his soul and meaninglessly receded. He walked back towards the poised taxicab that had been asked to wait, when he knew this wouldn't take long. And now to go home, he guessed. He thought, now to go home and see his mother. 3 ... There were around 7 units of measure, be it miles, kilometers, etc., to get back home. Not really very far. Still, as he sat, the floating scaping of a half-alive world opened up before him. Flitting spots of light blinked through the sunny greenness of the trees. It was supposed to be quite a feeling. He put his sunglasses on, waited around 20 seconds, took them off and snapped off one of their arms. He put the glasses on the seat next to him. It was a dark brown imitation leather which smacked of America, perhaps, in the 1970s. The car slowly rounded one of its last corners, now deep in suburban territory. Kurt tranced out, staring at the inner door handle of his door. The inside of his semi-head began pulsating in a manner not to be described as exciting, because it so was not. He thought of the many years going by like seeds in the wind, figure skating the many tides of the drift, often wailing quietly in emotional desperation as they did so. These thoughts were of no quality, and had never had shine to lose. He opened the fucking door of the car. He stood and sort of stretched a little, looking around, reacquainting himself with his old has-gone territory. 4 ... It was around 1 p.m. Kurt walked the stone path to the front door of his mother's house. The house's exterior motif made sure to include cherry and wine, maroons, and still a bit more. He knocked carelessly but not reckless. He loved his mother, though all emotion had been drained from him. It was a disassociated phenomena for the hollowness that called itself Kurt. She answered the door and let him in. She tried to hug him, and they eventually were sitting in the living room together, sharing a pot of a darker jasmine-ish tea. The cat meowed outside, very shrewd in a way. Kurt was really goddamn bored, but in the presence of his mom, he felt almost a little soothed. He panned his vision slowly, to take in the walls, their trim, the imperfections spattering throughout the white-gray ceiling. The television was on, but muted. After quite a while, of the two of them patiently allowing a somehow fairly comfortable silence, he said, "Hey Mom, look, I thought I came here for some reason, and that when I got here I would go beyond that, in a bad way, and behave in a very callous manner. And while this is definitely the case, I really don't want to encourage myself. I don't want to not be as nice as you deserve. I think I should just leave right now. Listen, the house looks very nice these days. I like what you've done with it." And with that, Kurt really did get very close to smiling at his mom. "Life is precious, Kurt," his mother replied, "even sacred." She paused. "Don't worry so much. You're going through some changes right now, but when you come out on the other side, everything is going to be very different for you. The universe is broader than perception. You just remember that. And I don't want to see you go, but I'm going to walk you to that door right now anyways. You're always my boy. That I do know." And she smiled patiently and affectionately towards him, knowing she would not get anything close to a reaction, save for him standing up in order to be let out. And eventually, she shut the door behind him, gently crying. 5 ... The truth is, Kurt was a nice man, good and decent man. Not only did he feel bad for his mother, he felt worse. It was just that he was immersed in the awareness of the underwhelmingly fascinating cycles of A, someone feeling bad, B, someone being consoled, C, someone feeling good, D, something bad happening, repeat cycle, chew up some space. But he was a nice man, and he would never want to cause anyone pain, stress, or grief, least of all his blessed fucking mother. Now he pulled his hair back to prepare for meeting with his wife, the love of his life, well, former life, as it were. Her name was Jeanette, which to him was really a rather beautiful name, though there was a time where he was known to remark to himself in his own mind that it could seem otherwise, when certain types of people cast the wrong light on it. Always casting quickly, those types, without regard for even their own processes. And she was Vietnamese. She had lived in America for 3 years before she had met him somewhere by a huge lake in the middle of Florida. She was a tiny woman. He had loved how he had always been able to lift her up with one hand, although she was 31 years old and she was his equal and soulmate in every conceivable way, and although she was first and foremost his adult wife, hell, even older than him in years. He had been 28 when he recently perished. Nonetheless, she was also like a best friend to him, like a mother to him, however rarely, like a sister to him sometimes, and yes, very occasionally, like a daughter to him, being as extremely tiny as she was. It would almost be funny to make a joke about how she was, however, not at all like a brother to him. Almost. As he recalled all of this information, he also recalled what the experience of depression once was like, years beforehand. Soul disregarding depression, infecting. All this he sighed away as he walked up her little walkway, to her little door. Their old house had been burnt and thereafter abandoned forever. A sliver of opening stared at him because she always knew when he was coming. He pushed the door open gently, walked in, turned, and faced her there. She stood with her hands on her hips and looked up at him. "Well, look who's back," she muttered, staring at him with deep understanding, love, and her unique brand of zen. "You have to be able to throw it all away." I do. He stared at his feet and felt uncomfortable. It was refreshing, of course. Time to wash it all away, he thought to himself, as he was thinking of all he was, experientially, emotionally, everything he had once cared for and so preciously had nurtured, everything he had atoned for, everything he had had such complete gratitude for. Wash it all down. Wash it all away. Even the thought of what would come to pass after the washing. "Would you like to eat something?" "Honey Grams." Always a funny man. Such a funny man you are. I missed you so much. So much. Why do you have to come back? So I can miss you twice? 50 times? Whatever. Would you like to sit down? Please, over here. And they walked to the back porch of her backyard of her tiny little cottage. She was wearing a small black fuck-me-red dress, and her little white panties kept exposing themselves as she led the way outside, and they sat down. "I missed you too. Very, very much, Jeanette. You have no idea. But, and I don't know why, but that part of me is dying off now. I'm sorry. What I mean is, you mean you don't want me to feel so bad, obviously." And she broke into tears and wept before him silently, her little eyes never ceasing to look up at him. "I don't have anyone to take care of me anymore, and I never will again." He knew all of this was true, and it would never stop being true. So he said all he could think of to not hurt her further. "Go get me a beer." "Okay." She smiled through her rosy little wet face, soggy with tears, and got excited. She bounced up and almost sprinted to the fridge by the icebox. Her panties somehow still as beautiful as ever, one of the few rather eternal things in this fleeting world, where luck and destiny governs the fate of a large, spinning, ball-shaped rock. 90 minutes later, he was pretty damn drunk, and as unenthused as when he arrived. The problem basically was, Every time anything happened, he knew what to expect. And not just the idea, but all through the core. He knew everything, and he definitely knew nothing. He sat and stared at her little backyard. She sat and stared at him. Mosquitoes in small groups bit into his flesh, were killed by him, and everything else that goes along with that. He had lost the urge to itch. Soon he would leave. And after he left her place, he would be very close to leaving everything. Thank you for picking me up all those times. I love you, she said as she was crying again. Her eyes were open and he could see further than into her soul. Her legs were open and he could see her little white panties under her skirt. He eased his wife's burden with words that could easily be misconstrued by others, as they frequently have been in the past, and then he left her alone. But she was not nearly as alone as he was, and he preferred her never to be so. 6 ... Now he was very drunk, somehow. He walked through the city streets at night and purchased more beer as he went. He used money to do this, money for the beer he drank as he walked, and became more and more drunk, until he reached a kind of a drunken plateau. Finally he arrived at the river. It was a river which opened out into the ocean. Its waters coursed steadily. The town was buzzing very mellowly behind and around him. He felt physically worn. What was left of his body was beginning to fade. He had begun to see through things. He remembered his childhood. Kurt was one of those humans that could see very far back into his memory. This particular recollection was from when he was 2, and in his cradle. His inventive father had placed a television above him so that he could watch movies and be entertained, as well as not annoyingly screaming all the time. His father had also made sure it was positioned so that it could never fall on him, and he remembered watching this television one day with an old western playing. The main character was a good guy, and in good standing with the peoples of the small town that he inhabitationed. This man was usually moderately well dressed, and today he was in a prison lobby, visiting the local law enforcement chief. They were eating somewhat fancy bread and drinking coffee. Kurt remembered how much this had hypnotized him, this scene. Time had slowed to a sloth's pace, to say the least. Well, of course, I normally shouldn't ever be talking about this sort of thing with folks, so don't go spreading this around. But the fact is, she did what she did, and now she's going to have to stand trial for it. I mean, I love the people of this fair town, but I don't care who you are. If you done something wrong, you must pay the penalty. There ain't never any way around that. I just feel sorry for that girl's poor father. What a nice man, and what a hardship he's got to endure now, the cop had said to the hero of the story, as he slowly peered about, and then looked as though he'd lost interest in his own pronouncements, and then had finally taken a sip of his steaming coffee with a look of savor, sighing with punctuation. The hero, on the other hand, had appeared distracted the entire time. Well, now, I don't know, John. I just don't know, John. And so forth. The scene had continued for a while in this manner. What a texture that scene had engraved in the etchability of Kurt's fresh 2-year-old psyche. That scene was the sort usually found a little after the middle of a movie, existing for no real exclamation, really only there to be itself. And it went on just being itself. That had given him great satisfaction, solace, and what he would later realize it was named hope. Unfortunately, I suppose, he had seen this movie when he was only 2. Let's just say he was considerably older now. This was kind of the issue. 7 ... Now his body was very faded. Not much left of the man. He sputtered into waking life. He was very hungover, but the trouble of that did not really touch him. He opened his eyes and slowly sat up. Somehow he was in a large open green field, surrounded by dirty industrial structures and pebbly overgrown parking lots. This area of his town had long since been abandoned. Even the so-called dregs of society had very little interest in being near here. It was not an evil place, more like a mixture of pointless, boring, and empty. Somehow he had lost his shirt, but he still had his old jeans on. Those things would make it through an apocalypse, he half thought. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his last pack of cigarettes, which had 3 cigarettes left in it. It was almost over, he knew. He lit one on fire at its tip and smoked it for a little while. Before it was 1/3 gone, he flicked it away. He saw no real difference between where the thing landed on the ground, the plants around it, and it itself. He knew no difference anymore, and he had no real regard for geometry, as if he ever really had. He thought of his relationships, not of the relationships he had had with people, with loved ones, but the relationships between himself and the housing reality of his world in relation to his relationships with his loved ones. He thought of this as he faded more and more, nearly gone now. That which he thought of, that had always been a utility for him. Almost always only that. In the past year, however, he had just barely started to explore those meta-relationships and to fathom. Now he went further into that awareness, and his self started to dissolve. Time went by for a few last minutes, and he enjoyed it on purpose, because he knew it was the last time. I am ready to go home now.